Welcome back, everyone. Welcome back. I hope your time away was refreshing and has helped you move into a good space for our ongoing time together today. As you know from our look at our schedule for today, this afternoon, when the centerpiece of this afternoon, in addition to our ongoing conversations, will be a rich panel presentation. So more about that in a moment. But as we prepare for that, and as we engage now in some unpacking of that good conversation you had just before we took our leave of each other, I want to invite us once again to be very aware of the quality of our listening. We want to engage in good, generative listening that helps us interact with each other and with all that is being shared here. So we want to listen for new insights, things that resonate with our experience, as we mentioned, sparks and connections, and also for those invitations that seem to beckon us to move forward into that emerging future, whatever that looks like for us, that's inviting our practice to stretch and to grow. So let's just stay very attentive to listening with those ears on. And as we get underway, we want now to return to the good insights that were being shared among us during your breakout session conversations. So we were looking at what are we hearing that connects and resonates with our experiences? What perhaps new perspectives or new learning edges might be presenting themselves? Am I hearing anything that I didn't think of before? And where might I hear perhaps an invitation or a call to explore further? So we know you had some good conversations about these questions, and we'd like to just open the space now. Who might like to share something that's striking them, staying with them from that conversation? It doesn't have to be something you said necessarily. It could also be something you heard from others. What's striking and staying with you from that conversation? Who might like to begin?
I could say a few things from our group. The 2010, like listening 20, talking 10, that stuck for many of us. Some people working with sacramental formation with youth, like older youth in confirmation, but also considering the parents within that, to create spaces for them to listen. Also, the other thing that really stuck was as examples of how we hear adults express the faith life gap in their lives. Like that stood out, because people aren't going to say, like Anne said, people aren't going to say, oh, I'm experiencing a faith life gap, but they're going to say these things. And that just opened our ears to hear what other people are saying to us.
Thank you, Christine. Very rich. Thank you for sharing that. Who would like to build on this? What things were you sharing as you walked along the road together in your breakout sessions? What's striking and staying with you from those conversations? Yes, Mark, please.
Well, I guess I would pick up on what Anne Walsh said when she talked about meeting people where they're at, but then taking the step to journey with them to a new place. I like the action-oriented message of that, but I also have been reflecting on something I heard somewhere else recently about the church, on people on the periphery of the church, and that they know how the church is to look, and that somehow we have to be responding to that and hearing what it is that they have to tell us about how the church should look. So it's that accompaniment piece that comes into play, and learning from one another, kind of through that listening process that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Marg. Again, very rich. Who would like to build on this? What were you hearing? What were you talking about in your groups that's staying with you, that was significant for you? Yes, please, Bernadine.
We too spoke about the comments that Anne had made, and that had resonated with me particularly, but with the whole group as well. That need to accompany, move forward, as Margaret was saying. We also talked a bit about hearing those terms of spiritual conversations and attentive listening, the need for that in our church, and that it's become even more visible to us, brought more to our attention through this whole synodal process that we're going through. But it's something that I myself have been hearing for years, and was able to, I love that whole idea of the spiritual conversations where we are listening more than talking and telling people what they need to do, but being attentive to what their needs are and trying to accompany them through that.
Thank you. Such wonderful insights being shared. Thank you. Who would like to add to that? What were you hearing and what were you discussing that's staying with you?
One of the, if I might,
Yes, Martina.
one of the things that came out in our group was the gap that can exist between the lead learner and the people being accompanied, and to be really attentive to those gaps. So it can be language. So using a church language that's not inclusive. It can be around the experience from gospel to life, life to gospel, and it can be culture as well. And so just to be careful that we know who we're speaking with, we recognize that it will be potentially mixed and that we need to adjust our sails accordingly.
Thank you, Martina. Again, such important and rich conversation. Does anyone have anything they would like to add to that? What were you discussing and what's staying with you? Yes, please, Mary Ellen. Oh, Mary Ellen, you're muted.
I try to be careful to mute when I'm not.
We've all been that person.
Well, I was very touched in the sharing of the Montreal group pastoral team, and I brought it to the small group too. The awareness of the great need for the priests, that, you know, in parishes, I do believe their participation in this whole process and the synodal process is so critical. And yet if they themselves are struggling and don't have a place, a safe place to just speak aloud freely all that they're struggling with and their questions, I just really feel for them, and then for all the church. So I just felt it's important to bring that out in the whole mix.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Thank you. Such an important insight. Would anyone like to build on this? What were you hearing? What were you discussing? What's staying with you from those good conversations? Yes, please, Catherine Cherry.
I was reminded actually of my own research, filled with some sadness, that the people who tend to be very conservative or traditional, that there's a lot of fear there. And how they can really block someone else from being able to grow in the faith.
Mm.
And I'm left with a question I'm putting out to you. How do we deal with that fear?
Mm. Mhm. Thank you, Catherine. It's a good, poignant question for us all to hold. Thank you. Anyone else? Charlene, you have something to add, please.
In our conversation, one of the participants mentioned how often she listens or can get caught up listening to fix something or to or as a purpose, like the listening serves something. But the recognition that listening is part of the process and has value in and of itself. And that really struck me myself, you know, and we're talking a lot about listening and the synod on synodality, which is a lot about listening. And it was an invitation for me to stop and remember or check my own posture when I'm with others and when I'm listening. Am I listening to fix something? Am I listening with an agenda, I guess, maybe? Or am I really listening with an openness, that kind of theory you listening? And it dovetails a little bit because at the very, very beginning, Carol, when you were going over introducing the resource and introducing the methodology for the research and talking about theory you listening, I was struck again by the comment that our blind spots are our experience. And again, that was a good reminder that how frequently I default to my experience, and that's the lens through which I hear or through which I see or through, it's not bad. It's just to be aware of it, I suppose, and to try to come to these deeper levels of listening.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you. Would anyone like to build on this, to add something? Yes, Corinne, please.
Yeah, for me, I think when we were talking, we were again looking at that time of what's like when we're looking at the peripherals and so forth. And I guess for me, it's again just being really aware that if we are in an emerging church, that if we're in that space, that there are multi dimensions, and like so bringing in and being able to listen to people in the peripheral, people in the center, and that fluctuating space in between, that allows us not to have like kind of that like a flat Stanley church, or not to be that just a snapshot of a church that isn't breathing and living and growing. And I think that's an important part where the listening, when it's a diversity of listening, allows us to be in that space of the emerging church. And for me, again, checking your own biases, not being scared of that, right? Like that change. It's like when you're entering into other stages of your life as a mom, when you're all of a sudden not in the baby stage and you're moving into the stage of parenting or not parenting or other stages of life in general. It's, being able to see it with fresh eyes and being able to say there's good that's promised in this emerging presence, right?
Thank you, Corinne. Thank you. We have time for one more intervention. Was anyone waiting to add something? It would be very welcome if you are. All right. Thank you, everyone. And I invite us all to keep that generative listening ear on as we now move into what will be an interactive panel presentation. Lorraine.
Right, thank you. So it is now my pleasure to introduce our panelists who bring two essential and different perspectives to the resource findings and to adult religious education and accompaniment here in Canada. So first, Sister Mary Ellen Francoeur, as mentioned earlier, is a member of the Sisters of Service. Mary Ellen has a long history of accompaniment in the spiritual and faith life of adults and children, and as well as in the areas of peace and social and ecological justice. And Dr. Ann Walsh is a well-recognized and respected leader in adult faith education in Canada, as well as the current chair of the Association of Canadian Catholic Adult Faith, and continues to be active in adult faith formation in the Archdiocese of St. John's, Newfoundland, as well as for the Redemptorists, with whom she's an associate. So welcome, Sister Mary Ellen, and welcome, Anne.
Yes, welcome to you both. And as I mentioned, our panel session will be interactive. So we invite all of you, as you listen to what Anne and Mary Ellen have to offer us, to make the connections, to find those generative questions and insights that are arising for you. Listen for points you may want to take further, or questions you may want to ask, or comments you might like to make in keeping with the conversation. And as we move forward, we'll be opening that up to all of us. So Mary Ellen and Anne, thank you for agreeing to be our panelists this afternoon. And as Lorraine mentioned, you both bring such diverse and central involvement and perspectives to this conversation. So as we get started, the first thing I'd like to invite you to comment on, if you feel inspired to do so, is what we were just hearing, sharing from those breakout room discussions. Is there anything you want to respond to as a beginning place for our conversation?
Now at this point, you're just really asking me to reflect on the breakout rooms and sharing there. I just really appreciated the varying ways that are emerging already in the Canadian Church across the country in creating those safe places for various groups of people. And in this phase of the research, people who often are more on the margins or feeling in some way excluded, or living life experience that no one else perhaps could understand. So I just, for me, it underlines the value that I already have of the importance of those safe spaces, either one-on-one, but also, if possible, in small groups, where people can really share deeply from the heart and gradually feel safe enough to reveal their whole identity, their struggles, their joys, so that together they can grow in the faith of, how God is within all of this.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. Anne, would you like to add anything by way of response?
I think it's more the fact of the responses than specific things. I just think it's so important, and the conversation highlights for me the importance of being part of a community that's engaged in these kinds of discussions, in really reflecting on what it means to be a catechist with and among adults in today's church, in today's world, and being intentionally involved in intentional conversation, in study, and in reflection, but probably most of all, relationships. The importance of being in relationships with those among whom and with whom we are catechist, and with one another.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Mary Ellen. That's a very rich start to our conversation. So we're going to open the space now for Mary Ellen and then Anne to share what they would like, what they feel inspired to share with us in response to the resource and this stage in the research. And they're going to spend a little bit of time doing that. And again, I invite our really good generative listening so we can engage in some good interaction about all of that. And then we're going to open up for some space for all of us. So Mary Ellen, welcome. We're eager to hear from you.
Thank you so much, Carol. I've been at your events where you've brought the various resources that you've developed, and it's always a rich experience in these webinars. At this time, with the particular research direction, I feel an even greater link between the history of the Sisters of Service, catechetical programming and practice, and what is emerging more and more in your research, and certainly in the document that you've just developed. Catherine Donnelly, the founder of the Sisters of Service, had begun her teaching vocation in Ontario. However, when she heard the great need for teachers in Western Canada, where the new immigrants were going to be pioneering, building homesteads and farms, she was drawn to move to be there with them. And in her observations, she saw families living on isolated farms in very difficult circumstances. And with these pioneers' energy going into basic survival, she could see that their precious faith, which they had brought from Europe, could be in danger without those to support them in growing in their faith and integrating it into their new life. So for her, their faith was a treasure, was the word she used, which must not die. And so at a very grassroots level, she and the other sisters were present. They were listening, paying attention to the real life of these people. At the same time, the sisters were also living this difficult life, which was a life really of physical poverty. So for Catherine and the other sisters, as they were present to these people in their need, the sisters experienced the care and service of the people to them. So it was mutual service and love. And Catherine could see that this was the basis for Christian community in a very real, practical way. So she encouraged the people to be serving each other in their need, thus learning in an immediate, real life way what Christian community was about. The faith life gap, I could say, was being bridged, and Christ was present in a truly living way out there in the West. And this carried on in this vast territory. And so the sisters could see that it called for a new form of religious education. How could they be present to these people in the growth of their faith? In 1926, correspondence religious education was born in Canada. The sisters made that correspondence as personal as possible, with little notes to the children and their families. But also essential to the program always were the summer trips out to the small towns and farms, where the sisters met and lived with the students in their home environments, meeting their families who were often engaged in the religious lessons along with the children. So they really got to know firsthand what the life of these families was. The sisters taught outside on the ground in circles of exchange, and they spent part of the day playing games with the children. God became present to these homes through the living presence of the sisters. And the sisters experienced God in the simplicity, the vulnerability, the hospitality, and fidelity of these people. In the 1970s, out of Western Canada, one sister of service was involved in a new project, the development of a national program for Indigenous peoples. Can we even believe that that took place in the 1970s? Much care was spent in meeting these people where they were, in their culture and in their communities, because they were included. The Indigenous peoples were included in the research and in the planning. Some years later, the sisters began correspondence religious education ministry in Newfoundland. Again, going out to small ports, coves, harbor communities who were isolated from centers providing any religious education. And these people infrequently had the presence of a priest. So along with their program for faith development, the sisters would celebrate communion services with these families. And the sisters have reflected that in that way, they represented church for the people. But I would tend to say that CREC's research reveals that their very presence of loving care and listening brought church and the gospel alive in those marginalized spaces, just their presence and listening. And communion was being celebrated in all the ways of sharing in word and deed on those visits. So that's past history. I believe that the SOS continue in different ways being present to people, but always with that very personal, interactive way and listening very much. And I hope all of this is helpful as we continue our sharing.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. So you've said so many vital things in those few minutes. And I just encourage all of us to really hang on to the insights that Mary Ellen has shared that strike you, that may be new insights, perspectives that are life-giving for you. And we're going to come back to discuss those. And in the meantime, we're inviting Dr. Ann Walsh. Ann, what would you like to share with us about?
Well, first of all, thank you, Carol, and thank
Yes.
you, Mary Ellen. The first thing that always dawns on me is that when I hear doctor, that's somebody else, that's somebody different. So it's Ann, and through my engagement in phase 3 of this research, what I'm very much struck by the synchronicity, by the fact that we engaged in this research as the synodal process was unfolding on the regional and the Canadian and the worldwide level, and now on the continental level. There's a different phase emerging of that research. And the importance of walking with there has really come to the fore. It means meeting people where they are, accompanying individuals and groups, facilitating and assisting people as they do the work with our assistance, the catechist's assistance, of connecting their story to the story. And for me, that's a huge movement. That the work of catechesis, you can frame it in all kinds of ways, but with adults, it's about taking people on a journey, being with them on a journey from somewhere to somewhere else. But it's the journey that's important, that we're on a road, and that we're on a road together, that people know that there's support. But why we're on the journey is to connect our stories to the story. How do we fit into that great Christian narrative? Now, don't ever use those words with people. I hardly ever do. What I do say is your story matters. What's going on in your life matters. And it's important to work with people intentionally, now individuals and groups, to help them discover where Jesus is on the journey with them and how he's inviting them to walk further, to go further, to fullness of life. For me, the passage from John 10:10 is a hugely important passage for catechists, and it's really short. I came that you may have life and have it to the full. And I think that's really important. For me, as we entered into this research, three stances, I guess there's three words emerged. For me, the stance of the catechist, as it emerged in our research, is to be a listener, to be open, to be non-judgmental, just to be a listener, but also to reflect back to people what's being heard in the listening process. Why? So that we can go further together. So the spiral that is so integral to this research is really important, not just as a catechetical construct, if you want, but because many of us, I won't say all, although I think it's all, I think we learn in spirals. We come back to the same themes again and again and again in our lives. So if that's true, we don't come back in the same place and in the same way. We come back with new insights, new reflections, new courage, new questions. So for me, that catechetical process of the spiral is really important. I will never say that programs don't work, that there's not a place for programs. There is. But it's so important to form our catechists to be accompaniers on the way for folks. So the second word that comes to me after stents is vocabulary. Vocabulary can be an invitation or a wall. And so there's a different vocabulary that we can use together as catechists and in a university setting or in a study session than we would ever use with the folks in the field. So being attentive to what words we use and how they invite or deter. I remember in the parish in Sudbury, we had an argument, myself and one of the priests. I know that's hard to imagine, but we had an argument. And it was about the word incarnation and what people understand by that. So we polled 100 people as they came into Mass on a Sunday morning. And 97% heard reincarnation. So we became really conscious of when we use words, sometimes you have to explain. Part of the catechetical process is making the vocabulary accessible. So just being conscious of the vocabulary we use and how it can invite or deter. That came through as well in our study. And then how important it is to, as a catechetical method, maybe a way of thinking about our walking with people, is connecting their story to the story of Jesus Christ, the story of the church, the story of people who've gone before, the story of other people here and now, the story of people in different parts of our world, that we're about the same thing in all kinds of ways and places. So how important that is. So for me, what's emerging from that is a real, the awareness that there needs to be a real commitment on the part of the church in Canada and the church worldwide, to commit to adult catechesis as the most important kind of catechesis, so that people can grow in faith, that people can be engaged and can be those missionary disciples that Pope Francis speaks about so eloquently. Formation for catechists is really important. It's hard to be that kind of catechist that we're speaking of and around in this study if you don't have formation, good, solid formation about being a human being, about being a catechist, about having the content, but also the methodology, but having the love and the heart and seeing this as a vocation. This kind of ministry that we're talking around here is a vocation, and it does take skill, and it does take expertise, and it also takes love and commitment to being there for the long haul. Because as we walk this road with people, they're going to come back in that spiral months from now, days from now, weeks from now, years from now, and say, do you remember when? So how important it is to have all those things in our mind and to have people formed to be there to accompany people. I was really blessed in my early journey as a catechist, as a 22-year-old, to be a classroom teacher in rural Newfoundland. And Mary Ellen will have heard a little bit of this story before because we talked the other day. I was teaching in a Catholic school system, and I intended to be the music teacher. That wasn't what happened. Our pastor was both mentally and physically ill. And so far from teaching kindergarten music or grade 11 music, what I was often called to do was to be there to lead the Sunday Liturgy of the Word, or the weekday Liturgy of the Word, or wake vigils, or to pray with the dying and their families. Not what I was trained to do, but through the call of the community, I discovered what I loved to do. They called me. So important for me in that journey was that they called me, they recognized something in me that I didn't recognize in myself, and how important that was. I was woefully ill-equipped, but I had the good fortune of meeting the Sisters of Service, funny enough, and coincidentally, or maybe synchronously enough, they were based not far away in Clarenville, about an hour from where I was teaching. They offered home-based catechetical programs for some of the families in our parish who lived in areas that weren't served by the Catholic school. And I went with them as they visited the families that they were called to serve. I consider that one of the most important parts of my apprenticeship. And I'd like to hold up apprenticeship as a model for catechists. We need people to walk with us as we learn these modes and ways of being with people in a catechetical relationship. They went into homes. They worked with the families where they were and brought them a little further. They accompanied them. They played with them. They talked to them. They ate with them. They drank tea with them. And it was all part of the catechetical process. Who tells where faith and life separate, or where they come together? It was all part of a piece for them. They met with groups in church basements, rural parish halls, kitchens, wherever they could. And I still have a fondness for rural church basements and parish halls, wherever people gather. I have a fondness for general stores and sitting on barrels at night and talking with people about what's going on in their lives. I have been known to sit on the edge of a meat locker and talk with people about things that are going on in their lives and helping them to see that this is God at work. So the Sisters of Service were part of my apprenticeship. Not the only part, but a really important part. And what I think is I'm being called to as I listen to us today and throughout this process, is to apprentice one another and to do that good work of catechesis as people are where they are, but not telling them that's all there is. There's more. I came that you may have life and have it to the full.
Thank you, Anne. And thank you, Anne and Mary Ellen, for the richness of what you have shared. And our chat has been quite alive with people engaging with what you've been sharing with us. So let's open up the space for all of that chatting that's going on in the chat to actually take place verbally with one another. What are you hearing, everyone? What are you hearing Mary Ellen and Anne share that's sparking for you that you would like to add to or comment on or take further? So let's open the space. Maybe some of you who have written comments would like to start the way. Yes, please, Catherine Kelly.
Yeah, I really resonated with a lot of what both the speakers said, but I think with Anne, she kept saying take people further on the journey, and sometimes people need to go deeper where they're already at. And so it's a nuance, but I think it's really important to recognize that we can be moving in both directions. The other one, I really resonated with the apprenticeship. I'm in charge of Christian Life Community at our parish, and right now we have 4 groups, and we're probably going to go to a 5th or 6th group as well. And so I need people to guide them. I can't do them by myself, and people are hesitant to do it by themselves, but I co-guided with them. I said, we can do it together, and then they can learn how to do it. And then eventually I step back and they can run it on themselves. I'm still a resource to them, but that's been a really, really helpful way, I think, for people to do it. And also for me to grow as a guide, to see what questions people have, to learn how to teach it better. So, yeah.
Thank you, Catherine. A really good example of apprenticeship at work in what you're doing. Thank you. Jan, you have your hand raised, please. What's resonating for you that you'd like to discuss?
Well, so much of it is because I just had 14 little cookies receive their first communion on Sunday. And I think of the months getting ready for that. And it's a kind of an inner city parish where we have less than 100 people on Sunday mornings, usually around 60, an extremely diverse parish. So for us to have 14 families come forward for sacraments we're doing backflips and we're celebrating. But the issue becomes keeping them in the fold. And so what I've been struck by listening to Anne and to Mary Ellen is that there's more effort needed to engage with them. Although I do over email, but to do more work, to get more parishioners to engage with these families. I mean, out of the 14, we probably had 5 that came to Mass regularly before the sacrament, which again, that's like, woo, that's good for us. So anyway, I'm just throwing this out there saying, it's the thinking outside the box part that I'm thinking about when I'm listening to you. I'm thinking, how are there ways to really connect and form relationship with these families more so than we have been, to try and make it relevant for them, make church life something that would appeal to them. And that's just my thinking as I'm listening.
Thank you, Jan. And you've underscored, and so have Mary Ellen and Anne, that theme that keeps coming up in our research and in other places, how the relationships are key. There isn't anything without the relationships, and it's not even just doing for the other, it's the knowing that we walk together. And as Mary Ellen mentioned herself, it was such a nurturing experience for the sisters to go to those edges with people and to be with them there. Yeah, thank you.
Can I just share an addendum to that?
Sure, Jen.
Because I'm not naming names or anything and you wouldn't know who it is, but there was one mom in particular who said she's not Catholic. So I don't know, I guess her husband was Catholic. And the little guy seemed to be, a little bit, I think he's on the spectrum. So even if you had regular weekly meetings, this little guy, it's going to be a little bit challenging for him, right? She came back with emails, often very abrupt, very, I didn't get this information. I didn't, whatever. I'm so busy. I've got an infant at home. I'm whatever. When she showed up on Sunday, the first thing she did was wrap her arms around me, a massive hug, and then when the mass was over, when she was leaving, the same thing, a massive hug, so this person needs a gentle place to land. And good on her for bringing her son and going the distance. I went to meet with them at school because she couldn't do it with them. She couldn't sit down with them and do the lessons, but anyway, I just share that story because, God's people are wounded and they're walking a rough road, some of them, and they just need a little TLC.
Yes, we are. That is so true. And thank you. Thank you, Jan. That's such a great example of the relationship building that has to happen, doesn't it? Charlene, please, welcome.
Well, just hearing Anne and Mary Ellen and now hearing Jan share her experience, it it triggered a memory that just happened yesterday in my own parish of a woman who came up to me after Mass, who I've seen, but I've never really chatted with her. And she asked how my sister's doing. My sister's abroad right now, but somehow they knew each other. So we started chatting a little bit more. And it turns out she and her daughter had stopped going to church during the pandemic just because it was so complicated with the registrations and the limits and this and that and the other. And she said, but we really missed it. And we really missed the community. And it really struck with me that, again, it's like the importance of relationships and the importance of being with people and the importance of living life. Like for them, they're coming back to Mass now on a regular basis because it's the relationships and it's the community and it's what they find there, you know? So it just really struck me in the context of what we're speaking about now, and how, again, reaffirming, I suppose, how vitally important that's hospitality, community, relationships, and listening to people really are.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Charlene. Well said. Again, such rich insights. Terry, you're waiting to add something, please.
I appreciate everything that I'm hearing. And I guess my question is just around how important time is. And sometimes we feel like time is sucked away from us just because sometimes of the liturgical year, you have to do it by this time, whatever. And this relationship building, these circles of exchange, this hospitality, it takes time that I find sometimes I almost feel guilty at saying that I need more time. But it's so important. And again, I appreciate, I think it was Kathy that sent a message over to me around, practicing the spiritual conversations. And in doing that, especially in our listening sessions with the Synod, that was so important, not only listening or taking the time for our own debriefing in between, but for capturing the spirit in the conversation. And I think that's a little touch point for myself, that I have to not be afraid to say no. We're taking the time, we're going to do this right. And so to offer that creative tension or the pushback sometimes, and to explain why, especially within the communities of practice that we're trying to sort of sometimes mentor or apprentice, or to show them why that's important, that, it doesn't have to be timed, right? It doesn't. It's God's time that we need to appreciate. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Lots of tensions to hold there. And you were getting some applause from other participants. So you're obviously giving voice to something that has resonance for others too. I wonder if either Mary Ellen or Anne want to respond to that struggle to find the time that's needed. And time is not infinite in the events that we hold. So any insights to share?
I think two things, Carol, and maybe helpful, maybe not. I think that notion of God's time is a really key thing to hold here, that I can have all kinds of expectations, but ultimately expectations are a form of judgment. So my expectations need to be left at the door. And I mean, in the sense of expectations of people and their response. It's not my work to do. It's God's work. And I'm just doing my best to help. Now, it doesn't absolve me from doing my best and getting the best training that's available and praying, those kinds of things. But it's God's work we're about. And so God's going to work in God's own time. And then please God, it goes back to the issue of having a formed community or an open community. But I may be the person who's there when the person is ready to speak or to move further or to go deeper, or it may be somebody else. That's not my call to make.
Thank you, Anne. Mary Ellen, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Well, certainly it is a struggle for me. It's really important for me to keep growing in that, letting aside, as Anne was just saying, letting aside expectations, because even if I don't voice them, somehow the energy affects others and they feel put off. Don't expect from me. And yet, when something is precious, what an interesting experience right now in the parish that I belong to. One person took a lead in saying, I really feel I need anyway to do something around relationships with Indigenous people. And she just put it out in the bulletin or whatever. And by golly, an incredible number of people responded that they were interested in getting involved in that. So where does energy go? What kind of passion is present in people? And so you move in that direction. Just because of my background, well, actually, I'm very involved with Indigenous people, but also with ecology and climate and whatnot, which is such a great need. And the response doesn't have that same kind of passion. But I keep saying, well, the two belong together. So it's to stay open again to, that God's way, God's time. Where's the energy within that allows people somehow to make time? But yes, and total surprise that happens. I mean, in the climate environmental work that I do in the parish, we started a little pollinator garden. Well, one person volunteered to come and help with that, and I met her to show her what was going on. And lo and behold, my time with her, she starts opening up about something completely personal, where she really needed help. And she really wanted to speak to a priest because there was something she'd been holding for years and years. So who would have known meeting at the pollinator garden would be the moment of God's time?
Right. Thank
so
you.
There's so much mystery around it, isn't there?
Yes. Thanks to you both for your responses. We have a few people waiting, so let's open the space for them. Christine Taylor, please.
I'm just listening and reflecting. So in our small group, we had talked about the sacramental formation journey with children. And then I heard it from Jan. But in the Sisters of Service there, what Sister Mary Ellen was saying is that we really, like when the sisters went, they went and met with the families. Like that was so important. And then today in our own diocese, we're spending lots of time for sacramental formation. The parents need to be present is our thing. And one of the things that we're experimenting on or trying to experiment on is at our parish where I volunteer. I work for the diocese, but I volunteer in my parish. And we take the families for coffee, like all the parents individually for coffee. And it's that individual journey. It could see. So when you come as a class with all the, I hate that class word, when you gather as the families for the sacramental journey, that, you can't meet the people individually or build relationship in any meaningful way. And so what I found over the years, we've been doing this 7 years, this will be our 8th year now, going for coffee, like you hear people's stories and their concerns are not about the formation journey. It's like I went with one mom. She had 3 girls, different fathers. Her big question was, do I have to tell the lifer, I'm in a prison town, that my daughter's receiving sacraments? That was her concern, right? So it's not, I had these foster children. I don't know where I'm going to find the baptismal certificate. So we figured out which reserve they were from and that she needed to go to the Anglican diocese. So it's just, for me, it's a humbling experience to go for coffee with the parents because you just hear all the struggles that they're bringing. As Jan said about her one mom who hugged her, like they're just coming with so much. You're like, wow, you're coming. I just want to bow down and that you're putting effort into this sacramental journey with your child with all these other things. And I have so many stories, but to spend time and see each family that comes as their own domestic church and realize they're on a unique journey is one of the things that we're really grappling with and trying to understand. How do we honor that and respect that and help them to own that they're on this individual journey? That's where our efforts are trying to go.
Thank you, Christine. Again, very rich sharing. Catherine Cherry, please.
I really liked what you said about training for the catechists, and I would even mention ongoing training. One of our very dedicated catechists, after a few years, suddenly said, "You know what? I just discovered that Catholics are Christians." Can you imagine that? She didn't know. And I mean, she's humorous, so has a great sense of humor. So we still tease her about it, but the necessity opened the idea that, you know, Bernard Lonergan talks about the unknown known, the known unknown, and the unknown unknown. So sometimes our catechists have areas where they need growth, and we don't know it, and they don't know it. But if we have ongoing growth, somehow or another will touch it and help them, and in their ongoing growth and education, we keep their enthusiasm, and we eventually touch the areas where they need to grow too.
Thank you, Catherine. Such important points. Appreciate you sharing them. Mark Shea Lawrence, please.
Yeah, I mostly want to just honor Mary Ellen's presentation. I think we have to always think about our work, I think, in terms of the continuity of those who have gone before us and those who have laid foundations before us and for us. And the Sisters of Service obviously have done an outstanding job and are continuing to do that by their presence in this St. Paul University program. But I think it's a question for me of who, maybe I was the apprentice of the sisters, whoever those sisters were as I was coming up, Sisters of St. Joseph in my case. And now who will I journey with in terms of the apprentice? Who's on that journey with me? I think thinking about that and thinking about how, and then what contribution am I making? Like, will somebody tell my story or our story down the road to keep that continuity going, you know? But anyway, I just really am grateful for anytime I hear the stories of the sisters and the work that they did and continue to do or continuing to do. I think it's something we need to really honor all the time. And Anne Walsh has a great sense of that in her presentation there. I thought, you know that story very well. But anyway, continuity of our experience is what I think about now.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. Much appreciated. We want to give Mary Ellen and Anne now a chance to respond to what they're hearing. And then we're going to move into some more breakout rooms so we can have ongoing discussion about all of the rich things we're sharing. So Anne and Mary Ellen, maybe in that order, Anne and Mary Ellen, some concluding remarks.
I think what I would just most like to say is that the quality of the interaction that we've had around two fairly simple presentations in light of the research that's being done, it's really the important part is the engagement. The fact that what you've been doing in the chat box for sure, and then on the screen is you're connecting your story to my story, to Mary Ellen's story, and then to the bigger story. That's the work of catechesis that you're doing right now. It's so important to see it in that context, and then to know that we belong to a community gathered on this screen, but a wider community of catechists too, and how important it is to be part of a community of catechists who's living that journey with so many people, who's part of a, as Mark said, a continuous journey. It's in continuity with a past, and it will continue after us. And so I think it's really important that what we've done here is really listened to what's come out of the research, listened to our experience, listened to the gospel, and tried to put all of those in dialogue with our lives. So thank you for that. And I'm going to pass you over for a last word to Mary Ellen.
Yeah, just maybe a couple of things coming together. I'll build on what you're saying, and about, yes, we're doing it now. And that, I think that's what I've appreciated in all the CREC webinars and conferences. We're all sharing with each other and growing together. We haven't got the final answer. We're growing together as we share. And that when you're talking about continuity, or what Anne referred to earlier that I really want to touch on, that spiral process, we keep coming back to the same. So from the earliest years of humanity, there was a searching for, what is this life all about? A searching for, or gradually sensing there was something beyond who I am right here in this particular space, but there's an interaction going on. And so through the years, it's come to catechesis, people saying, how do we help each other? How do we help ourselves and each other grow in this whole question of, what is it all about? What are we learning about the meaning of life, and whatever we call the divine or the holy or something, this greater than ourselves reality. And so through the years, the way keeps evolving. And so that's what's still evolving. So that's a whole spiral in itself, isn't it? We come back to over and over and over again, as Anne said, the whole question of, how do we approach this growth in faith? How do we journey together? What approach? So then I need training. And at the same time, always knowing that this moment will teach me. The Spirit is there and will guide. But just that spiral too of, it takes time. And each time I come back to maybe the same questions, the same big issues, or even a word in my faith that I've never totally understood, and I'm still searching to understand it. Each time I come back, I'm in a new place. I've had so much new experience, and I'm with a new group of people, and what they're sharing may touch off something. So I'm just sort of on fire with the sacredness of what this all is. And if I were younger, I'd love to be trained as a catechist, because I just see it as such a sacred vocation and journey.
Well, thank you, Mary Ellen, and thank you, Anne, and thank you, everyone, for this very rich interaction. I certainly do want to take a moment specifically to thank our panelists. Will you help me do that in whatever way we can? So appreciated. So appreciated.
Thank you, Anne.
Thank you, Mary Ellen. It was nice to finally meet you.
So now we want to give some time for some more small group, some good interactive conversation. So once again, you're going to find yourselves in small groups where you can have a good chat with others about these important things. And the questions that we're inviting you to share are very simple ones, and they're probably rather obvious. What am I hearing here today? Now, again, we certainly want to refer to this rich panel presentation for sure, but we also want to open it up wider to everything we've lived since we gathered first thing today when we came and introduced ourselves and began our prayer. So what am I hearing here today that is significant for me and for my leadership accompanying adult faith? And I want to keep it and bring it with me. So that's the first question to explore. And then what might I want to continue to explore? Have there been some insights, some sparks, some learning edges that are shaping up for us here today that we want to continue to explore? And then finally, how might I integrate this, whatever's coming to the surface for us? How might I integrate this into my practice? Take it further than, so to use this as a place to move forward from this good session and conversation today. So again, we'll post the questions in your room so that you can refer to them. And you'll have a good 20, 25 minutes for this conversation. So should be able to cover some good ground together. So what am I hearing today that's significant? I want to keep it, take it with me. What might I want to explore further? And how might I integrate this into my practice? So once again, you'll find yourself in a room with a few other people and a facilitator to help guide the conversation. And we'll let you know when we're coming down to the last 5 minutes or so. And then again, we'll invite some good unpacking together when we return to the plenary. So wishing you very good conversations, and we'll see you in about 20, 25 minutes.
Been coming on the heels of the publication of the new directory for catechesis, and in the midst of our universal synodal journey, where we have been invited to practice being a synodal church as we begin learning how to listen to each other. I agree with you, Carol, that the overlap with the findings is a sign of the Holy Spirit's voice and call. This resource provides for us engaged in adult faith in its multiple forms, a true theology of adult faith as defined by Gutierrez as a grammar of the experience. Through the use of theory you listening with open hearts, minds, and will, you, Carol, have listened with other practitioners to the current lived experience of those engaged in adult faith education and helped us give voice to our experiences. I heard, and from what I've heard today, from those gathered here, our experience is reflected in your articulation of the faith-life gap and of bridging it. This work is offering a liberating theology for adult faith that provides a process for all, from the lead learner to those new in their faith, to those few who have reached Fowler's definition of mature faith, a path for growth and deepening. A way for all to bridge the faith-life gap, that no matter our stage of faith, no matter the stage of faith that we are experiencing. This work has also alluded to the true struggle of engaging this process, as you reference Fowler's work, and noted that few adults reach a level of mature faith, which for those working in the field is a key realization. The need is great for this process, as is the need for more lead learners with this understanding of what good adult faith education can offer. This work research needs to be shared by all of us with those in our circles of practice. And though you did not mention this specifically, I want to mention how I see this research and approach to adult faith education as one of the ways that we will use to evangelize the culture. Rolheiser speaks of secularity being a child of the church, and that at this time the church is that the child, secularity, is an adolescent. Fowler also mentions that the majority of Christians are at this time adolescents in their faith. This approach to adult faith education that listens and makes room for the person to take the next step on their faith journey will, as the purpose of adult faith is for the individual and the world, could have significant impact on moving an adolescent secularity towards its own maturity. I like to dream big. This work brings out the focus of true adult faith formation and does more than preparing one to win at Catholic Jeopardy, but brings truly a fullness of life that addresses the hopes and desires of our human heart. Too long the church has majored in the minors, and the pun is intended, of children's catechesis. What I hear in the research is the invitation to flip the focus with more emphasis placed on adult faith formation, which I hear in the church documents all the time, which includes parents, while continuing the current work of children's catechesis and sacramental formation. So we don't stop what we're doing, but we increase our focus on adult faith education is key. I do not want to miss saying something about research on what some would also call the peripheries. In my experience in my diocese, listening is significant within the experience with the Indigenous communities and spending time and just being. It takes time and it builds relationships. There is much to be learned about listening and our own faith journeys. By listening to those often heard on the peripheries, we grow. Finally, I wish to add the importance of this Canadian research cannot be overstated. As we read in so many documents, context is key. We have a unique context in Canada, and to have research attempting to mine the depths of our experience is truly a gift. I look forward to further results from the next phase of this research. I look forward to your further offerings of clarity of the faith-life gap and more about the processes that will help adults to bridge this gap. Listening enlarges our tent. Through your research, you are doing this for us. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. It's a wonderful reflection to bring our few hours together to a close, and it's greatly appreciated. Before we wind down, we just wanted to take a minute to share with you some of the visions on our horizon, the way forward for our work in the Center for Religious Education and Catechesis. So I'll just take a moment to share that with you now. So we have some good news because we have agreement in principle for a 3-year proposal that we have made to the Sisters of Service for the Center for Religious Education and Catechesis. And it would take place, as I indicated, over a 3-year process. And so beginning in January of 2023, so just in a month's time, phase 4 of our awareness-based action research would begin. The focus, now you'll see how this really connects to the section on the burning hearts that we expressed as we were concluding the resource, if indeed you've had a chance to look at that. But we mentioned in that section that as phase 3 comes to a close and we prepare for phase 4 of our action research, we move forward with burning hearts, trusting that renewed life and energy come from this encounter on the road. We are hopeful that these findings point to an emerging future of more effective adult faith education accompaniment practice for all of us. We're eager to, along with you, integrate the findings into practice, explore the results, and be attuned to the new research questions that emerge. We trust that Jesus continues to come alongside to walk with us in all the liminal spaces that lie ahead. It seems prophetic that while the working document for the continental stage of the synodal process has just been published under the heading "Enlarge the Space of Your Tent," because we sense that many of our findings ask us to do this. Once again, we sense the alignment with Pope Francis's call. As we move into phase 4, it seems essential to ask what kind of adult faith education, catechesis, accompaniment is needed to support this synodal church. As phase 3 was getting underway, you'll recall, the core of the nation's capital was paralyzed by a convoy of truckers and supporters demanding an end to the government's mandates related to the COVID-19 pandemic. This reflects a broader Canadian context and, in fact, the context of the church in Canada, which is characterized on many fronts by polarized positions and frequently by vitriol. This reality, as well as many findings from the research project to date, point to the importance of studying more fully the practices that empower mature Christian disciples who can hold, and incidentally, to build on what we said, who are also mature human beings, that's integral, who can hold the tensions of paradox and difference and overcome polarization. Polarization erodes the culture of encounter, of listening, and prevents us from walking forward together. We look forward to continuing the journey together and to all of the encounters and conversations that can happen over the days ahead to support effective practice in adult faith education for all of us in the church in Canada. So I read that in conversation in tandem with presenting this work to you, because it really does reflect, I think, what is the ground under our feet for moving forward. And the focus for our next phase of research will be to explore that adult faith education, the catechesis, the accompaniment that's needed for the synodal church to be realized, and to continue to work with our findings. And of particular concern is practice that educates for the human maturity that's integral to Christian maturity and discourages polarization. We could even say makes it possible for us not to polarize ourselves. In the spring, this coming spring, we'll be holding another Faith and Life, Where Faith and Life, excuse me, meet symposium. We want to go deeper for sure with what we have discovered in phase 3. We just put a little fingertip in today. And so we need more time and space for that. Excuse me. So that will be our purpose in the spring. We have a book project with Novalis. Very excited about that. And it's going to be a Canadian resource on adult faith education, accompaniment, catechesis. Lorraine and I, and excuse me, I've got a frog in my throat. Lorraine and I and Miriam Martin will be the co-editors for it. We're excited to do that work together. And it will be a textbook that's based on our findings. And along with the three of us, our authors will be focus group members who have participated, and some of our semi-structured interview participants from the research project. So we're really looking forward to working on that together and to getting out of the gates, you know, a Canadian resource on adult faith education that's based upon what we're discovering. We're hoping to offer as well some more frequent community practice gatherings like today, where we can come together in interactive contexts and explore questions and concerns in adult faith education accompaniment that are of concern to us. So we have a plan going forward to organize more events like this. And again, based upon the work that a university does with its research and providing formation. And we have an objective, it's a clear objective, to begin a certificate in adult faith education accompaniment in the fall of 2024. It would be a 2-year process running September to May. In those 2 years, it would have a strong apprenticeship feature. So you'll be glad to hear that in light of the kind of conversation we were having today. And it would be offered through the Institute for Transformative Leadership and Spirituality, which is a new institute within the School of Transformative Leadership and Spirituality at St. Paul. So these are the things on our horizon. We're very much looking forward to them and eager to invite you to be part of that journey with us. Lorraine, do you have anything to add to this?
I do not, Carol. I think that you've picked it up really well, and I have to say it's really in many ways, when we talk about synchronicity, much of what we have discussed today, I think, really aligns well too with the certainly the next phase, what we see as unfolding from this research. So I'm really thankful and grateful for this opportunity that we've had to have this kind of sharing today. Thank you,
Yes.
Carol.
Yes, thank you, Lorraine. We have a lot of people to thank. Our presenters today, the group from Montreal, you were wonderful. Thank you so much for all you brought to our conversation. To our panelists, Anne and Mary Ellen, huge thank you. The richness of what you offered and the conversation that ensued, I think is, the proof is in that pudding for sure. For all of our group facilitators, thank you so much for stepping up to help accompany those good conversations today. A huge thank you to our focus group members who gave so generously of themselves and are real partners in the resource and in the research that has been done. We've met several times over the last few weeks to make sure that they were seeing themselves and the work we did and all that was coming together in the findings. And it's such a huge reminder when they're shaking their heads and saying, oh, I see myself on page 20. It's such a huge reminder of the richness that we can only, the wisdom we can only gather when we do it together. And just the contribution's been huge and so grateful. I want to, Gabrielle, thank you for the amazing support you always offer for these events. I don't know what we do without you. And Lorraine, my co-researcher in phase 3, I would not have made it through phase 3 without Lorraine's partnership. She's been just an amazing support and colleague, partner in the truest sense of the word. I think we met each other where we were along the way an awful lot over these months, and just extremely grateful for that, Lorraine, and for all you bring to the table. And to the Sisters of Service, our ongoing gratitude for the support for this work. And then I've saved the best for last. All of you, thank you for coming here today and being part of this conversation. We really are a community of practice, and we need one another to be able to journey together and to build our wisdom and to strengthen our practice. So thank you so much for accepting the invitation. I hope you'll accept more as we move forward. Now, I've prepared Lorraine.
So I would just myself like to say thank you to you, Carol. First of all, on behalf of everybody here for your, but also on behalf of, I'm going to say, the Canadian Church, for your faithfulness to this journey, the way you have lived this research, in that we spoke about continuity before, and I mean, you model that for us, the integrity with which you have engaged and continue to engage in this research journey, and continue to build right on the insight and the legacies of others in a way that really does enable us to find our place in this and to really truly hear that call, right, to accompany one another. So I want to hold that up, Carol, because I think that you're an incredible model for all of us, for an adult faith education accompanier in the way that helps us all to be much more human and much more Christian. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Lorraine. Thank you. Thanks, everybody. That's very kind. Let's have a appropriate, good send-off with a closing prayer together. And again, you'll see that there's room for all of us in here. So again, we begin together as we make the sign of the cross. Radiant Creator, awaken us to your presence. Jesus, light of all lights, kindle love in our hearts. Spirit of illumination, guide our path. Amen. Emmanuel, God with us, as we continue our annual pilgrimage to Bethlehem, keep our hearts burning with passion and desire to walk all of the paths, the easy and the treacherous, empowered by your presence on the road with us. As we celebrate the coming of your love and light into the darkness, allow us, as we walk along together, to open the learning and growing spaces that invite that light and love for all we meet. In the name of Emmanuel, God with us, we pray. Amen. And again, a thanks to Joyce Rupp for her gift of wonderful prayer. So without further ado, once again, thank you all so much for being here. And this has been recorded. Gabrielle, is that going to go up on our website? And will people receive a link in case they'd like to refer back to any parts of today?
Yeah, I will send a follow-up email to everyone who registered with the links. It might take a few days because, you know, I want to make sure maybe to cut it into smaller pieces so it's a bit more digestible. But it'll be put up on a YouTube page and then placed somewhere where we can all easily find it. But you'll receive directly an email telling you exactly how to access it. So don't worry about that.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you, Gabrielle. And another thing you'll receive, we were rushing to get the resource out to you before we met today, but there is still a little bit of tidying up to do. Maybe you've seen some of the typos that are there. So we have a list of things that we're going to be polishing up, and then we'll send you final copy as well by email so that you have the nice polished final version. All right, blessings, everyone. Thank you. Take good care. Hope to see you soon.
Thank you.